Minutes past 9.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA, wishing all our customers a very happy, safe and joyful Christmas.
Dry tonight with frost and mixy patches, lows of 0 to 3 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Football Show on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power. Fake crowd noise? The Emirates never sounded so good. Gamble responsibly. See dunlewy.net.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then.
What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Second half underway at Goodison Park. It's 0-0 between Everton and Manchester United. United with the better of the first half, 61% possession, 10 attempts to Everton's 4, but it is 0-0. Seamus Coleman captains Everton this evening. Paul Pogba is playing for United. Van de Beek started as well. Bruno Fernandes started. They're playing with Diamond. It's Cavani and Greenwood leading the line for Manchester United this evening. Later on, we're going to talk to Tim Vickery. Last time he was on the show, he paid a brilliant tribute. He got great feedback from lots of you to Diego Maradona and his passing. Tim's going to look back on the year that was, give us an international flavour, because Dan McDonnell is going to give us the Irish version of the Irish Independent. Hello, Dan.
Hi, Joe. Happy Christmas and all of that.
Oh, don't say it like that.
Well, I mean, I do actually mean it, but you know, it's at that time of year where it's like, you don't always mean it to everyone you say, but I actually do mean it to you. I mean, I hope you're having a good Christmas. I think you're in sort of wind down mode, aren't you? You're sort of on the way out now, are you? This is it.
Dan, it's been a long year. It
has been a long year.
A lot of nights in here, sometimes without much sport on. I'm in my last hour until I think January 4th or 5th. So frankly, my plan here, Dan, is eating celebrations under the desk and nodding anytime you're talking and looking at me.
Right. Is that different from your standard performance, or is that related to your previous point in any way? I don't know.
Oh dear.
Well,
Excuse me. Sorry, my headphones fell out there. My headphones fell out there. You're having a go at me, though.
This is full wind down mode here. This is last day of school mode here.
No. Listen, professional to the end. So the plan here, Philippe Auclair did this last night, and it was good fun. It's a nice way to kind of review the year. We've asked some of our favourite people on, i.e. you, Dan, to give some thoughts on the year that was. So you have sent on a few bits and pieces which you would like to touch on. In no particular order, they include FAI off the field, naturally, Brexit. You have, obviously, Republic of Ireland in a big way on the pitch, Mick McCarthy's departure. We have Stephen Kenny era, League of Ireland as well. And actually on the League of Ireland front, you've texted me just before coming on air saying, don't go to the League of Ireland review at 9:31. So I won't do that. We'll get to it early.
Past experience.
Sometimes we get into tangents. Whatever's last on the list, we never get to it.
But it's all part of the same thing, really, in many respects.
Of course it is.
It overlaps with Brexit and a lot of the other stuff as well.
Yeah, well, the Brexit thing is interesting. The Brexit thing is not interesting, but what it means for Irish football is genuinely significant. So we will come to that, and we will touch on what that means for League of Ireland as well as the League of Ireland season that has been. Before we proceed any further, I just want to give a shout out to Ian O'Brien. He's from Carrigaline. He's a Cork City fan, Dan, based on his Twitter feed. You tweeted that you were on the way after 9 o'clock. And Ian O'Brien tweeted you back saying, that's my podcast run sorted. So Ian's not listening live. And I'm curious to see, as he's out for his run tomorrow morning, if he hears this and goes, oh my God, they're talking about me. So we'll see. Does Ian follow through on his promise to, one, go for the run, debatable, Christmas Eve, if ever there's a day you're going to take off, and two, to listen to us. So Ian O'Brien, out for your run. Happy Christmas Eve from me and Dan.
Yeah, hopefully it's a better one for Cork City, because they've had a pretty disastrous 2020. So
that's
hope
true.
They have a better 2021.
So look, I'm going to follow your lead a little bit here. I mean, I guess the starting point is if you lose an Irish manager or say goodbye to an Irish manager and hire a new one, not least Stephen Kenny and where he's come from, then that's the big talking point in some ways. I will get into the off the field stuff.
Yeah.
But and again, it's all interconnected. One of the real tests, I suppose, for the new FAI was to figure out what the hell to do with the cancelled Euros, and does Mick McCarthy get to stay on now until the Euros, or how do we handle that? On balance, in hindsight, and even at the time, we all felt they handled it pretty well and quite cleanly, and Mick McCarthy made as dignified an exit as it could all be hoped for.
No, I think so. I mean, maybe some of his commentary stuff was less dignified, but the actual exit itself. I mean, if you think about where we were this time 12 months ago, you can do that in life with everything, in every subject and every review. But I suppose when you consider that 2019 was probably the most turbulent year in Irish football history, or certainly a contender. So I mean, they'd had like a year of crisis before they hit into the pandemic year, and naturally it sort of, it had an impact in a very, very dramatic way. And I mean, this time last year we were looking at Shane Ross, we were looking at would the FAI even survive? I mean, it always was probably going to, but I mean, the issue of solvency and stuff was there hanging into January, and we always had this thing over our heads of, well, we have that playoff in March, could qualify for the Euros in the summer. That could maybe be the shot in the arm that the game needs, and then everything changes, as we know. And like, in hindsight, like everyone is a genius, and there are still people there who certainly hold the view that they shouldn't have changed manager at that stage, and they made that point loudly after Ireland lost on penalties. But some people had made that point before it as well. And I would have had the view, certainly, and I think I wrote about this at the time back in April, which feels like years ago at this stage. I think if Stephen Kenny's first game was Slovakia away, I can understand why you might leave Mick in charge for that. But really, once the contracts were timed, were pretty rigid, they were time dated. They did what they had to do. There was more complications in not doing it, really. And just because it didn't work out the way you would have wanted doesn't mean it wasn't the right decision. Like, I think that it still makes more sense now that Stephen Kenny got 8 games to adjust to the job, even if they didn't go particularly well, than a sort of a halfway house scenario where Mick McCarthy would have been in charge for games in September, maybe October, then we'll see what happened in November. You couldn't have done that. You clearly couldn't have done that. So it was the right call, but it was it was an unfortunate way for things to end. But really, and listen, I have full respect for Mick McCarthy and his great service to Irish football. But in the context of what has been a pretty grim year for Irish football, and for a lot of people within Irish football who are still struggling on account of things that predate COVID, I guess it's sad he had to leave the way he did, but he did leave, with more money than a lot of people have left Irish football. He left with a deal, and that's what happens in management. And he's managing in Cyprus now. So, I mean, I think that it reached the most plausible, the most amicable conclusion you could have reached, and probably the only logical one. Yeah. As much as there's points that could be made to the contrary.
He left with about £1 million, didn't he?
Yeah, and he would have been on more. He had this weird one of being on a bonus as well if they qualified, because they made a sort of a hard and fast rule. And actually, I can see why they did it. It was like, well, we've inherited these contracts, so we are going to honour them, even if some of these contracts are weird, and that's basically what they decided to do. And Mick McCarthy, on account of the sort of idiosyncratic way in which this arrangement was put together, was entitled to X amount and would have been entitled to more if Ireland had qualified, in the same way that Stephen Kenny was entitled to take over, that Robbie Keane was entitled to go on to a bigger deal. And while there are sort of quirks and rights and wrongs with all of that, the new people there making decisions said, well, the easiest thing for us to do is just follow on from these deals, because we didn't make these decisions. And on balance, I can see why they did that, even though, but again, this is my point, you see some money going out of the association in different ways, and you think, yeah, that really sticks. So it doesn't really make, the handover and Mick McCarthy losing out, the great disappointment of the year. There's a lot more sad stories elsewhere.
And is Robbie Keane still on salary and in limbo?
He is, yeah, he is. Nice work if you can get it, I guess. Like it's again, Stephen Kenny was told from the start he could have his own backroom staff, and that was clear. And that, again, I think that is correct. You don't foist someone on a manager. And again, that was clearly stated. I mean, I would have been aware of that back in 2018 that he would pick his own backroom staff. I guess over time maybe he might have decided he'd wanted to work with Robbie Keane, but I think a lot of people would have been aware last year that wouldn't have been the case. And sure enough, it wasn't the case. But he's left on the FAI books. And look, I mean, again, he was given that. He was given that, so it's not Robbie Keane's fault at all. And it's just obviously a strange one that he remains in that limbo. There has been speculation that the FAI have been trying to find a role for him of some description. He was linked with some other jobs which didn't come to pass. But we still have a lot of bizarre things that lingering over from what went before. And that most certainly is one of them.
It was around this time last year as well, the extent of the FAI debt was made public. You've just said there, let's take stock of the full year. I think the figure was just over 50 million, which was seen as shocking at the time. Now, debt is as manageable as your earning power is. So, is 50 million an absolutely insane burden for an association the size of Ireland to carry? And this is before COVID comes into it either. But was 50 million a real solvency issue? They have to get the government bailout, obviously, and that's painful and that's kind of embarrassing for football. But once they got that and kind of got things moving, it seemed the odd time we would hear from them like they were kind of saying, look, this is manageable enough. We're not in any immediate danger anymore. Yeah,
but I think there was a certain jubilation, when that rescue deal was agreed. Well, I think maybe the last day of January or thereabouts, outside the Department of Sport, and there was a sense that they'd got a chance now. And the signing of that became a story later on, and Roy Barrett and all of that. But leave that to one side. There was a feeling they got a very good deal from their various partners, which involved some of their commitments to the stadium being covered. And you are right, debt of that size, they clearly felt at that stage it was manageable. There was sort of various deals done around it. Now, but the problem, as you said, I know we all flippantly say sort of pre-COVID as a thing, but it is something that really came down the tracks really hard. They needed 13 million euro of COVID relief before the year was out. The League of Ireland wouldn't have restarted, I guess, without some kind of support indirectly coming from government to make it happen. And there is a feeling in 2021, with no crowds on the horizon in the short term at least, that they're going to need a similar amount, if not more again. So really, the financial picture isn't very good at all. Yes, that debt figure, I guess, they've been managing that amount over a long period of time, and they found a way to get by. Get by in the sense that, the place doesn't go in flames, and you don't turn out the lights. But it's not necessarily conducive to, proper investment and spending in football. You can pay your bills, and you can pay your staff, and as we've seen in the past, you can occasionally hire a big money manager or pay big contracts to certain people. But I guess in terms of putting a sustained amount of money into development, really properly funding stuff, that debt figure means that if you do have a big win, say you qualify for a tournament or something like that, it's more likely that money is probably going to be funneled towards servicing debts and commitments rather than necessarily growing the game. And this is one of the debates. The Brexit thing, for example, potentially puts the spotlight on our ability here to really manage the development of elite footballers between the age of 16 and 18, and we don't have the structures here to do that. And you can talk about ways of doing it. But the easiest way is more funding. Obviously, everyone wants more funding. Yeah. And the FAI's fundamental problem is that it's snookered in what they can do by their financial situation. So yeah, they've survived. They've survived. The lights being turned off permanently. But they're still sort of fumbling around in the dark a bit a lot of the time. Yeah. So the debt may well be serviceable, but it doesn't mean it's not incredibly damaging to this period of Irish football, which is such a grim thought. And anyone who's followed the shenanigans within the FAI over the last decade, it would infuriate you if you care about the game and you love the game and you played the game growing up and you would like your kids to play the game. It's just, it's ridiculous what's happened. It really is. One last point before we get into Brexit then. So Mick McCarthy's departure followed by Stephen Kenny. Now, I deliberately don't do too much, I break with habit, Dan. I don't do too much research before these kind of chats because I think what comes to you is almost what will come to me in 5 years' time when I think back on his era. So what comes to me here, the ill-fated seating plan on a certain flight to Slovakia. Yeah. The Conor Hourihane chance replays in my mind over and over again. Yeah.
And then video pre-Wembley, the leak, the fallout, and maybe as much as anything, Stephen Kenny in his press conference saying that there are some. I don't want to misquote him. Did he say forces? Did he say people? He may say people.
He said behind the scenes. He definitely used the term behind the scenes.
Who don't have the best interest of the team at heart. Now, he didn't specify if that was people in the FAI. I increasingly think he's talking about people in the FAI, which is, that's the big story in some ways. Or he could have been talking about agents or other people who get involved and hear bits from a dressing room and
could be a bit of
leak it to
everything,
them.
Joe, I think.
Okay,
so
that's where I am on Stephen Kenny, and ultimately, look, just can't score a goal at the moment. So where are we on part one of Stephen Kenny's tenure if we're breaking it into parts?
Yeah, but it is. I mean, if Conor Harrington takes that chance, we don't talk about the other two, and that's the thing. The other 3 points you raise, but obviously, that is missed. The penalty shootout was lost, and then, it just turns into really like a bit of a disaster. And maybe I don't like to use that word lightly, obviously, because I mean we're dealing with a sort of pandemic and all of that. But in the context of like our narrow focus of Irish football, like it was a disastrous international window. October and also November, and the fallout, as you mentioned. Like, I think I was doing a piece, like an end of year piece, or maybe an early 21 piece for the paper, just trying to wrap up some of my thoughts on this as well. And like, Stephen Kenny came in with a wave of goodwill to some degree, but I think obviously there would have possibly been some people, say within Irish football, I think, who maybe wouldn't maybe have shared that. And I say that in the sense that all of a sudden, like, he was elevated to the top, to a position of authority that probably, maybe you could argue that nobody within Irish football has been given before in a footballing context, a football man, in the sense that, like, he came in, on the road to senior manager, was given responsibility over the effectively like an overlord figure when he was 21's manager in terms of the underage managers and all that, funneling up towards him. And then given this position on the executive, effectively, and the importance or otherwise of that, or whether that's just a symbolic thing or meaningful thing, has been debated. But it is a position that's there. And he also then came in September and really decided to change his entire backroom staff. I mean, never mind the high profile stuff. I mean, he really cleared out a lot of people that were there a long time, brought in his own people, and had made a decision to really go for it and try and create this new environment, a new environment for the team. But in doing that, you do knock quite a lot of noses out of joint, and that just happens. And listen, that leaves you vulnerable to the type of sort of murmurs and whispers and stuff that happens in every workplace, in every life, every walk of life, in every dressing room. There will be, X amount of players, staff, and look, what do you do? What do people do when they work somewhere? They'll gossip and talk about people that work above them, and I didn't like that, wasn't sure about that, and and you have people who are disaffected by maybe changes that have happened, and really that's normal. But then when you don't win games, those murmurs can lead to something else, and what we then saw was definitely mischievous leaks in November, where, without going into specifics, I think it's fair to say that there would be a lot of people around the game that would have a fair idea where they think stuff might be coming from, and it's probably loosely linked to maybe the dissatisfaction with changes that may have happened. And that's part of the growing pains of like a regime change. If you come in and try and change a lot straight away, you need to hit the ground running for that to run smoothly. But because they haven't hit the ground running on the pitch, it left them open, I think, to some stuff off the pitch, which, as I said, it was some mischievous stuff. And even the coordination and timing and content of certain stuff that came out afterwards, I'm not sure if it was necessarily people, if the tracks were covered in such a way that it wasn't so obvious where stuff may or may not have been coming from. And maybe if Stephen Kenny can, rather than obsess over perhaps where that came from and what the intentions of people were, it has the potential to be a galvanizing force if you use it in the right way, and maybe take stock of some things that happened over the last couple of months, see what you can learn from it, and go into March with the players and everyone from the start and say, listen, there was a lot of crap there. What do we need to do? Because at one point, it's not. I think there's a view out there, and I think you get text messages in there all the time, and I've had comments like this. Like there is a view out there that, well, there's some people in the media or shows are giving Stephen Kenny a very soft ride. He's getting an easy time of it here, and almost a sense that maybe after 7 or 8 games, like, we should be losing our heads. Now, I think that was Owen or someone. Owen maybe made a good point on off the ball recently. I thought it was phrased quite well. There's some people who didn't want the transition to happen. I understand why they're angry and raging, and that's completely natural. But from my perspective, I felt like the Stephen Kenny appointment was an important thing to try something different, to break away from the cycle of just appointing a manager, throwing loads of money at him, and just qualify for the next tournament, and that's it. And there was a logic in putting your foot in the ball, trying something different that may take time. But having called for years for that approach to be tried, you're not going to, after 7, 8 games, suddenly go, actually, all that stuff for years about trying something patient, a couple of results aren't going well, let's lose the plot and say this is a disgrace, and this is a disgrace. We always suggested it might take time, and it is taking time. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work, but it does mean, like, we've had a very unusual time in our lives. And I think one of the problems that Stephen Kenny has probably encountered, and he's made all of those changes to staff and everything, and then got into a hotel situation where people can't mingle like they normally can, where family and people can't come to the hotel, where players can't leave for a day off. And I think it's been quite intense. The environment's been intense, and it hasn't maybe led itself to the type of sort of harmony and sort of atmosphere that you would normally associate with an Irish senior team camp. And that is influenced by the factors that have affected all of our lives. And I think in that respect, he deserves a bit of time to get over that and see where we go from March, hopefully in a sort of a better environment.
Okay. Still 0-0 at Goodison with 67 minutes on the clock. We're reviewing the Irish footballing year with Dan McDonnell. You mentioned Brexit a few moments ago, Dan. Don't switch off, everyone. Don't switch off. I will
stick with it briefly. Let's be brief. I will
keep this interesting. Here we go. Stick with me for 30 seconds on Brexit. So, under FIFA rules, basically, clubs cannot sign a player from another country until they turn 18. There is an exception, though. EU country to EU country, you can sign a player once they're 16, as long as you offer the provision of education, which most clubs do. Now, between 30 and 50 of Ireland's best footballers go to the UK age 16 or 17 every year. Every year, our 30 to 50 best footballers go age 16 or 17. This has been the likes of, the most recent batch. Parrott did that, Caoimhin Kelleher, Adam Ida, Jason Knight, Aaron Connolly, Malumbi, you name it. So now, Dan, it would seem that the best 30 to 50 Irish footballers each year, age 16 and 17, are going to need to be developed here across these 2 to 3 crucial years before they can go to the UK. What's the plan for them?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the problem. There's actually no plan to be ready for that. Now, they may not stay. They may go to Europe, or in fact, some of them may still go. We'll see. Like there's as ever with Brexit, there's clause A, B, C, and I'm not sure if English clubs have fully given up on the option to take these players. But really, that's almost by the by, because what the whole thing has exposed is how we're not prepared for it. Like, the announcement that our players have to stay at home should be a cause for celebration. Like, all things being equal, it should be a great news story. It should be welcomed as such. It's like, we speak so many times on these shows about sending our players away early. They come home. Yeah, you mentioned the ones that are doing well there, but for all those ones you mentioned, there's 9 times as many who come home broken, no education, disillusioned with the game and the sport. And now we're faced with a situation where it's very possible that more of them, if not all of them, will be staying here. But what we don't have is a structure to actually embrace that, to develop Caoimhin Kelleher and Jason Malumbi and Aaron Connolly and whatever, and to give them the caliber of coaching and contact hours and exposure to specialized skills, etc., that they would get at the Premier League equivalents. And really, for all that we've spoken a lot in recent years about certain changes that have been made, positive changes, national underage leagues. There's been sort of various initiatives that I think the FAI can take credit for, and people like Ruud Doctor can take credit for. The fact is, all you can do is speak to people on the ground who are engaged in the sharp end of development of the sport, who don't just talk about it after Ireland have a bad loss and then forget about it for 5 years. These are the people who live it 365 days a year, and they're worried about this. They think it's going to cause problems for our elite players because we're still not ready. There's still a fractured relationships within the game. There's a view. I saw Gavin Cooney did a piece in the 42 today and touched on some points. Rude Doctor, for example, who's, as I said, has been responsible for some good changes, but doesn't really seem to be communicating regularly with people who are out there on the ground, who are influential figures at the top academies, who feel that they're not spoken to enough. So it feels like we have this amazing opportunity, but we're not actually ready to capitalise on it. Almost to the point that people are saying, well, actually, maybe it would be a good thing if this doesn't happen, so we can just keep exporting our players like we normally do, even though that leads to disaster for a lot of people who do go. So that's a pretty grim,
that's terrible.
Grim sort of picture to paint. Yeah. And people don't get around a table and talk enough about these things, you know. And that's still a legacy of what went before, I think.
I haven't heard much from our new CEO, by the way. Is that striking you as odd? Have I missed him somewhere? Has he been out?
Well, he's done it. He did a staff meeting with the FAI recently with the staff,
but I mean, talking to the Irish football in public.
No, but I think there's a conscious desire maybe to not be front and centre. Okay. That every press release that went out in the FAI in recent years, in the Delaney years, whatever. Well, if it was good news, obviously, if it was bad news, it was Fran Gavin or someone. Yeah. But if it's good news, or condolences to someone, the CEO was front and centre. I think Jonathan Hill, the new CEO, English CEO, has indicated he won't be doing that.
Right.
But he's got a new sponsor. Maybe sorting out sponsorship for the League of Ireland, and that debt that you mentioned, and all this commercial acumen. He's got a lot on his plate, but because of COVID, he still hasn't actually moved here. He's sort of working remotely like a lot of people, but he's going to be a big voice in 2021. But I'm not necessarily sure if he's going to be a big press voice and he's going to be going to newspaper Christmas parties.
Fair enough. Okay, so he may not be getting armchair rights from fans or putting his tie around his head, is what you're saying to me.
It's unlikely, But
we don't know for sure.
We don't know for sure.
Dan.
Yeah.
I got to interrupt here. You texted me at the start and said, don't you dare come to me on the League of Ireland at 9:31. It's 9:29, so...
Right. This is what happens, Joe. This is what happens.
No, sorry, that's on you as much as me. I got to work through.
Yeah, okay.
Come on.
Yeah, I gave some long answers there. I didn't even let you talk, But you're eating your celebration, so I don't interrupt.
I sure am, Dan. I'm half an hour away from freedom, but
listen,
for the time being...
It was half a season.
Yes.
It was half a season anyway.
Yeah.
So...
Well, what? Look, Shamrock Rovers are the dominant team, and they look to be in a really good place. Dundalk have had a messy season, weird season, kind of a sheen on it with the cup final win. General, big picture League of Ireland stuff. What are the key things you want to say about this year into next year? Yeah,
well, you see, the thing is that it happened, which is possibly a good thing when it looked like the shutters were going to come down. But the problem is that we still don't really know now in December when it'll start in 2021, how it will be funded. Will that streaming service exist again? Will there be crowds? So again, there's uncertainty every winter, but this is a really extreme version of that. And sorry to interrupt, when you say how it will be funded, as in because there won't be spectators for potentially the whole season? Okay. So they're going to need a package again. I mean, there was a support package, based of, some monies from government, states, some redistribution of funds, or they didn't charge other things. You can put whatever figure you want on it. They needed a rescue package to get the season going. They're going to need another one to get this season going, realistically. There was some nice stuff to happen on the pitch. I mean, Shamrock Rovers are very good. Jack Byrne was great. The Dundalk got to the group stages, even though people wondered whether Dundalk's American ownership would lead to a sustained period of dominance. But he's sort of capitalist out to dominate. But actually, they've shown great generosity of spirit by actually taking Dundalk down off the perch and letting everyone else sort of have a go, take some of their players for free. This is there's interesting issues there and all, but yet what's hanging over it is we don't really know what's going to be funded, how it's going to happen, when's it going to start, and it's really like everything. We talk about debt at the start. I mean, it's caught up in the same thing. Everything within football, and people involved in other aspects and sectors of the game will have their own issues of the same nature. But what we've always acknowledged that a strong League of Ireland is needed, but at the moment, I mean, it's not in any position. They should be debating the All-Ireland League and various things that have come up across the year, but really no one has time to do that because they're waiting to see well, how are we actually going to start this season, and will we have fans? And listen, football without fans, I was lucky. I got to go to a load of games this year. A lot of people didn't. But it's a soulless experience. You're really not missing out on anything. And I think particularly in the League of Ireland, for all that it gets denigrated for smaller crowds, in many respects, the crowd that go are more influential on the match day experience than they would be in stadiums that house 40, 50,000 sometimes, you know, and really, there's bigger picture issues as ever that need to be resolved long term, but there's pressing short term ones that prevent us from having the long term discussions. And that's a pretty grim. I feel like we should have something uplifting here, Joe. Like, is there anything, we're finishing on a bit of a low, but there's a lot of lows on that, I should mention.
Well, I've got a tweet in here.
Go on.
Okay.
Go on.
Lads, we're in the depths of depression in Irish football for years to come, says Obi123.
There's an uplifting one. The one thing, I think it was actually Will Clark who made the point in the Gavin Cooney. Will Clark's the director at St Joseph's Boys.
Yeah.
Like, if you actually look at it, like I watched Nathan Collins play earlier on for Stoke against Spurs. He did quite well. You've got Jason Knight, you've got Adam Ida, Aaron Connolly. He was latter end of last year. But actually the amount of Irish teenagers who've broken through at a good level this year and done quite well. I think Will made the point. It's the type of thing that people in other countries would look at and go, they must be doing something right in Ireland. Yeah. Yet actually, we're doing loads wrong and still getting some good players, which makes you think, God, if we could actually somehow get everything pulling together in the right way, what could we do? Because we do have a good generation of players on the way, and that should be up. Darragh O'Shea, just countless others really.
Yeah.
But we just need we need foundations sort of. For them to sit on.
Here's the hope for optimism then in various quarters. That new generation continues to develop, and they are a good generation. Stephen Kenny has a decent World Cup qualifying group innings. Maybe we don't make the World Cup, but that's acceptable and there's progress. And then we're really poised to kick on, hopefully under Kenny, widely adjudged to have done a very good job for the Euros, and we get to the Euros and play some good football there. League of Ireland package needed next year, but then fans are back, we have vaccines, and League of Ireland kicks on, maybe because they got a few kids from Brexit who are coming in, and there's a youthful exuberance to proceedings. And Jonathan Hill continues to not tie around his head and get armchair rides, and brings in sponsorship money, and maybe this debt hanging over us all isn't so crippling, and we can also develop the game a little bit here.
Listen, stick all that down in a letter and send it to Santa, Joe. It's a really nice end of year wish there. It's a nice thought. If one of those things can happen, it might even be a good year.
Listen, thank you for all your contributions across the year. Hugely appreciated and valued as ever, my man. Have a great Christmas. Thanks so much.
And to you, have a good one. Yeah,
you too. Dan McDonnell there of the Irish Independent. Still 0-0 Everton United, 78 minutes on the clock at Goodison. We will talk to Tim Vickery next.
Football on Off the Ball
with Paddy Power. New normal, same old football. Paddy Power. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
Hate missing out? News Talk Extra is news, entertainment and all the latest podcasts, plus expert tips and competitions straight to your inbox. Subscribe now at newstalk.com/extra.
Bet smart this season with stat betting on the Boyle Sports app. Bet on shots, shots on target, tackles, passes, assists and more, all powered by Opta. Plus, put your feet up and cheer your bets home with free live streaming on every UK and Irish horse race. Why not check out the hottest action on the biggest sporting events right now on the Boyle Sports app. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Need help? Contact gamblingcare.ie. 18+.
At Centra, we have everything you need for an inspiring Christmas. Delicious buttery short crust pastry mince pies, rich and velvety Belgian chocolate sponge pudding, and deliciously creamy goat's cheese bruschetta with red onion marmalade. So why not treat yourself to our award-winning Inspired by Centra range? Centra. Live every day.
Hello, Sally Ann Clark here. The Irish Kidney Association reminds you that over Christmas, transplant recipients are lighting candles to remember those who have donated organs, like my son who saved 3 lives. For our family, when we donated Andrew's organs, it was the right choice and we had honoured his wishes. Please discuss organ donation with your family because organ donation saves lives. For organ donor cards, free text DONOR to 50050. Thank you.
Supported by Organ Donation Transplant Ireland.
As tourism and hospitality businesses reopen across Ireland, you'll want to know you're safe. That's why Fall to Ireland introduced the COVID-19 Safety Charter. When a business displays this symbol, you'll know that business is agreeing to follow the recommended cleaning and safety guidelines, supported by staff training. And they also agree to undergo spot checks too. So, you can enjoy yourself with confidence. Look for the symbol nationwide. Brought to you by Fáilte Ireland and the Government of Ireland.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
Now you're back, so still 0-0 at Goodison Park. Everton 0, Manchester United 0. 10 minutes to go. Tim Vickery, hello.
Hello, very good evening to you.
You look very dapper.
Yeah, well, I was doing a podcast earlier on about the Christmas truce in the First World War, so I got into character with a kind of Edwardian collar. Maybe went a little bit too far, took it too seriously, but you got to take your pleasures where you can get them in these troubled times.
Well, indeed. There's a text in from Graham when I mentioned you were coming on. He says, question for the great man in Rio, which I liked.
Don't know who he is. You've only got me, I fear.
Does anybody call him Timothy?
No, never. My dad did when he was very angry with me, which was fairly often. But no.
If you heard Timothy, there was trouble.
I don't think anyone has done it and lived.
Okay. If you heard Timothy from your dad, there was trouble.
Yeah.
Often the way.
It was like those kind of cartoon things when people hit you, and you kind of. It was a bit like that, when he gave me a belt. It was old school. He was born in 1924. It's a different generation.
It sure was. So the year that was. We got great feedback, by the way, when you were on talking about the death of Maradona. We asked you to send in a few bits and bobs. We've been doing that with a few different contributors over the last couple of days. You mentioned again the death of Maradona, which we don't necessarily need to go over again. You mentioned Rossi as well. Was he a big deal for you? Were you a Rossi man?
Well, because these are some of the World Cups of my youth, 82 and 86. If Maradona was the star of 86, then Rossi was the star of 82. And no, I do feel a little bit like parts of my youth are being chipped away bit by bit. For me, and I don't think it's just personal nostalgia. I think they were the last two truly great World Cups. The next one along, 1990, although we English have happy reasons to remember it, FIFA recognised it was a huge disappointment with the lowest amount of goals scored, I think, per game. I think in any World Cup. They tried to free talent afterwards by clamping down on tough tackling. But soon after that, the kind of juggernaut of European club football takes over as the game's main event. And it's taken its toll, I think, on the World Cup. Because the big problem that the World Cup has had in recent times is that come the end of the season, players are absolutely on their knees physically because of the exertions that the European club season demands of them. So I don't think the last World Cups, I don't think they'll live in the memory anything like the way that 82 and 86 will. I did have hopes that by hook and by crook, for probably not particularly great reasons, I had hopes of the next World Cup, because it's being held in the middle of the European season, December. I hoped, and the process by which that happened clearly was far from satisfactory. But my hope was that because this was in the middle of the season, you'd get to see the best players closer to peak fitness. But I fear that the coronavirus situation has removed that advantage. So many games are being piled on. That I think any hope that players would be at their rested best in time for that World Cup have since been denied. So for me, you're probably too young to remember those World Cups first up. But 82 and 86 had some absolutely magical moments, which I don't think have really been repeated in subsequent tournaments.
Well, I was just going to make the point, because I remember, and maybe it is an age thing, I remember 98 incredibly fondly, and I quite liked 02 as well. I thought that had something going for it.
So, 02, Joe Malloy, was an absolute unmitigated disaster.
Was it?
Yeah, and I shall tell. FIFA will recognise this, and I shall tell you why. Because in order to avoid the rainy season in Japan and South Korea, it was held early. It was held, and it started the end of May.
Yeah.
So it was it started 2 weeks earlier than normal World Cups have started, and it meant that there was absolutely no time for. And remember, the Champions League at that stage, it had 2 group stages. They'd gone all out with.
Well, that was a grim time in all our lives. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it meant that come the World Cup, the players who'd been through the European season were just absolutely physically on their knees. And the big favourites were France and Argentina.
Listen, I remember the opening day, Senegal, France, like vividly. See, I'm wondering then if this is just all about your age, where you are in your life, Tim. You know?
I think it has a lot to do with it. That kind of subjective thing. But I think objectively, I mean, I did. It's the highlight of what I ludicrously call my career, or one of them. It's the interview that I did just after that World Cup in 2002 with Brazil's head of physical preparation, who very graciously, because he could have said I won the World Cup, but what he said was Brazilian physical preparation culture. There are 15 who could have been in my position, but we won the World Cup because Inter Milan couldn't get Ronaldo fit. We got him fit. Barcelona said Rivaldo couldn't play. He wasn't fit enough to play. We got him fit. Cafu and Roberto Carlos, who played the European season that everyone else had, they were full of beans running up and down. Why? Because we developed individual training programs. But we were ahead because of the domestic calendar of Brazilian football, because it has so many games. We had been forced, he said, to develop a type of physical training program that enabled players to get out on the field even when there were so many games being played. The Europeans hadn't done that, and the consequence of this was that those who played the European season were absolutely on their knees. I mean, the team that they really feared were France, who lost Zidane a few days before the tournament. He'd played the final game on one leg, but didn't even score a goal. And Argentina, who were brilliant in qualification with that high running Bielsa style, they couldn't do it either. Portugal, who had a good side, I think they lost something like 4-0 to the United States because they just couldn't put one leg in front of the other. So it was a World Cup that had shocks, but it didn't have quality.
Okay, interesting. Look, I was on my summer holidays. I was having like 4 bowls of cornflakes, chilling out, watching the matches. I had a great time.
Good.
You've turned that upside down for me. So, Maradona, Rossi, chipping away at your youth. Messi has scored goal number 644. So, in his 17th season, he's beaten the Pelé record of scoring most goals at a single club. Pelé at Santos, in his 18 years, had held the record, seemingly unbreakable. Well, it was always going to be broken maybe when Messi came along. But, God, it feels unbreakable now going forward, not least because it's at one club. So, Messi, 644 in his 17th season. We genuflect before him once again. 33 years of age now.
Indeed. I have a few thoughts on this.
Yeah.
One is that I think we are clearly seeing the beginning of the end of the Messi era. And he's not the physical force that he was. He can't get away from opponents. And he's still great because the range of his talent is magnificent. But I would imagine that that's going to mean that I can't see Man City being there as an option. And if he does leave Barcelona, I would have thought that trying to get into his shoes, and his boots are probably a little bit smaller than mine, but trying to get into his shoes, I would have thought that if he does leave Barcelona, Paris Saint-Germain would be the place that he wants to go, because he can coast a little bit, keep himself fresh for what really matters. Business end of the Champions League and one more crack at the World Cup. Were he to go, for me, the Man City thing now looks, I'm watching him over recent months, it now looks as if it's maybe 2 or 3 years too late for him to put himself through the challenge of the Premier League. I may be wrong. I've been wrong many, many times in the past. But also, I'm wondering how future generations will look back on this. Because there's a tendency now from today's pundits to look at Pelé's competitive goals for Santos and say, well, who were they against? You know, who was that against? You know, it was the São Paulo State Championship. Yeah. Looking from the point of view of the time, Brazilian football wasn't an export industry then. So it had the best Brazilian players, the vast majority of them, were playing in Brazil, with also some very good players from elsewhere in South America. So the level of opposition was much higher than you may think if you're just looking from today's perspective. Now, let's fast forward 30 or 40 years. The Joe Malloys of the day, they may well be looking back at Messi and saying, yeah, but those goals, I mean, how many of them were scored against Getafe and Levante and so on, you know? Yeah. Because I think by then, I would imagine that the European big clubs will have got their way and they'll have a European Super League. So, you know, there won't be as many of these games of Barcelona against the Getafes of life. I hope, and maybe I'm hoping against hope, that this doesn't happen. this European Super League doesn't happen. And the evidence that I'm bringing to the table here, it has to do with what's happened to Brazilian football, because Brazil is it's a country the size of a continent, and because of that, the tradition of its football is regional. It's now become national, but it was regional. It grew up as regional. These local state competitions were for decades the main event and taken very, very seriously indeed. Now, what has happened then is a lot of teams have big club status. Just in the south and the southeast, there are 12 giants. That's without the clubs that have considerable support in the northeast of the country. When football becomes national, you see that there aren't enough meaningful titles left for all of these clubs to retain their giant club status. Because if you have 12 big clubs in one league, someone has to finish 12th. No. And if you're consistently finishing 12th, are you a big club anymore? Brazilian football is an angry environment for two reasons. Firstly, is that Brazilian society is an angry society, but also because this regional past has generated expectations that cannot be realised once the game is national. Let's bring that one to Europe. So let's have a European Super League when you start with 20 big clubs. Now, those 20 clubs are big clubs because they win the majority of their games. But once you put them in one league, someone's got to finish 20th, and someone's got to finish 19th, and someone's got to finish 18th. And these clubs will no longer be winning the majority of the games. They'll be losing the majority of their games. So it's a process almost designed to bring about insatisfaction and to concentrate still further the number of big clubs in the world. You know, you might start with 20 big clubs, but looking 10 years down the line of that, you'll only have 5 or 6. And I'm not sure that's a healthy process.
Damn it, Vickery. Brilliant. They're so interesting, those two things. That point about the European clubs and the Messi, Pele parallels. Really interesting. Yeah. Even your dog approves.
Yeah.
Who is?
He may disagree. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, he's like, stop going on about it. Come here. So, who's going to step into the Messi, and I guess let's throw in Ronaldo as well, when they depart, if they're pretty close to that point as a de facto best player in the world?
Well, there's a lot of hope that Neymar can do it. I mean, if he is going to do it, he's not going to be able to do it for anything like as long as the Messi and Ronaldo age. I mean, he's 29 in February. So there's the big question mark against him, I think, happened in the final of the Champions League, which may be the biggest game that he's ever played for Paris Saint-Germain against Bayern Munich. And what worried me about that game is that from the moment that Bayern took the lead, from the moment that they scored, Neymar's game absolutely collapsed. He did nothing of note from the point that Bayern Munich scored because he was feeling the pressure of having to step up. He was feeling, I think, the emotional blow of losing. I think there's been a hideous error in his preparation as an athlete, in that he hasn't been prepared to lose. I once saw Peckerman, who has coached Argentina and Colombia and made his name as Argentina's youth specialist. He said it's an absolute crime to young players if you don't prepare them for defeats, because it's something that they're going to have to deal with. So that worried me there. I mean, Neymar is obviously a magnificent player, and he is very popular with his teammates. And Messi loves him. They get on extremely well. So there is the image of him as a spoilt brat, and I think that there are aspects of truth in it, but it's also something of a caricature. I think he's a much better bloke than that. I think he takes his game very, very seriously as well. No one gets that good at anything without loving it and taking it seriously. But that worries me. You know, he's on limited time. He's got maybe 4 or 5 years at his peak, because, you know, someone of that build needs that pace and acceleration to get away from the rival defenders. So he's got 4 or 5 years, and that means that he needs to overcome this thing of losing. And he went to social media afterwards and he said, losing is a part of sport. But that's the difference between social media and reality. You know, you can portray on social media something that you're not. And Neymar had clearly done that in those circumstances, because he clearly hasn't learned how to deal with defeat. He's only been on the losing side twice for Brazil in competitive matches. One was the World Cup against the quarter-final against Belgium. The other, I was in the stadium for. It was going back now 5.5 years, the Copa America of 2015 in Chile. They lost 1-0 to Colombia. Carlos Sanchez did a fantastic marking job on him. And at the end of the game, he kind of attacked the ref and picked up a long ban. And it was disheartening for me to see that in this Champions League final, he still hasn't learned to deal with defeat. If he's going to take on that throne, even if it is only for a few years, he must be able to learn to cope with defeat, because without being able to learn to cope with defeat, there are no definitive victories.
Okay. Clock's against us. Thanks so much for everything all year. Have a wonderful Christmas. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you in the new year, I'm sure. Tim Vickery. Thanks so much, Tim.
Look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Tim Vickery there. Always great to have him on. So, Manchester United fans, it's gone very well in the last 10 minutes while we were chatting to Tim there. Cavani scored a brilliant goal with his left foot from outside the area. It was a beautiful finish. And then just to put a cherry on the icing, United have hit Everton on the break, who were obviously pushing for an equaliser. And Martial finishing really, really well, counter-attacking move, and he side-footed it into the far right corner very calmly indeed. So a 2-0 win at Goodison for Manchester United. Full-time whistle has gone.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power. New normal, same old football. Paddy Power. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
Bet smart this season with stat betting on the Boyle Sports app. For the first time ever, bet on shots, shots on target, tackles, passes, assists and more, all powered by Opta. Why not check out the hottest action on the biggest game of the week right now on the Boyle Sports app. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Need help? Contact gamblingcare.ie. 18+.
Blocked nose, sore throat, headache. The symptoms of a cold or flu can really knock the stuffing out of you. So it's good to know that Nurofen Cold and Flu has the power to relieve those aches and pains for up to 8 hours. Nurofen Cold and Flu contains an anti-inflammatory and a decongestant, which should help you bounce back. Nurofen Cold and Flu, for effective relief of cold and flu symptoms. Nurofen Cold and Flu film-coated tablets contain ibuprofen and pseudoephedrine hydrochloride. Always read the label. 8-hour relief refers to ibuprofen.
Tech 2 students run by Trinity College Dublin and Camera Education Ireland are asking you to give the gift of a laptop this Christmas. Thousands of marginalised students across Ireland don't have access to a digital device. Help us bridge this digital divide. If you have a laptop at home or at work that you no longer use, please consider donating it. Alternatively, 100% of any cash donation will go towards a device. Please help us by visiting Tech2 students at tcd.ie.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power. Minimal contact in stadiums shouldn't stop the usual suspects from going down. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
Ole Gunnar Solskjaer on the pitch, high-fiving his players. They have beaten Everton this evening by 2-0. Cavani with the crucial goal from outside the area, brilliant left-footed strike. And as mentioned just before the ad break, Martial with a great finish as well on the counter-attack in the final moments. Big high-five there between Pogba and Solskjaer. That relationship genuinely does seem to be pretty good when it's just the two of them. And Mino Raiola's not sticking his oar in, so they're walking off the pitch together, all smiles. We're pretty much done, so tomorrow morning, OTBAM, it's the Off the Ball stars. See what we did there? Tommy Welch is going to pick his hurling team of the year. Valerie Wheeler is going to pick her camogie team of the year. Kieran Donaghy will pick his men's football team of the year. Aisling O'Reilly will pick the women's football team of the year. So that is the plan on OTBAM tomorrow. And then tomorrow evening, if you are driving home for Christmas or in the car heading somewhere hopefully nice for the 25th, we're going to bring you some of our favourite pieces from the year that was. So John Giles, usually on a Thursday, will bring you John Giles's Rest of the World 11. If you missed this piece first time around, it's really cool. It's John picking a selection of the best players he played against, and those names include Puskas, Di Stefano, Maradona, Beckenbauer, Cruyff, etc. So John tells you what it's like playing against those guys. Then we will chat to Kevin Phillips and Al Quinn. If you're of a certain vintage, that is a Premier League strike partnership that you will hold dear. Ian Wright and Sol Campbell will be in conversation with Nathan Murphy. That was a Cadbury's Roadshow earlier this year. And then David Brady talking about how the GAA has enriched his life as well. We chatted to him about that during the year, and it was a really lovely chat. So we'll bring you some of that on Christmas Eve tomorrow. So that is the plan between 7 and 10 tomorrow evening. In the meantime, of course, Tom Dunn is on the way next. Good night.